Good evening, how's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. Good vok, shavua tov. Let's light up the darkness. I see somebody saying no sound, but my device says I've got sound. Anybody else having no sound? Hopefully it's just one of you. Welcome everybody. Let me know. Guy in Ohio, Nancy awake in North Carolina. All my East Coast people on Saturday nights in the summer, you are my heroes. You are my heroes. Joseph in Sierra Nevada, Joe in the Inland Empire, Sharon in Northern California, Melissa in Great Neck, Frank in San Pedro, Ella in Southern California. Do we have sound? Somebody write in the comments that they can hear me, or I'm going to be very nervous. Then I'll get going once I've confirmed that you can hear me. Can you hear me? I feel like I have sound. Okay, I'm going to write it in the comments. Somebody? Do we have sound? I think we do. Just waiting another second. Somebody please write in the comments you can hear me. I want to make sure you can hear me. Now I'm concerned. La la da dee da. Yes, thank you, Melissa. Okay, let's go. Probably just the delay coming in. Okay, wonderful. Our dafs. Going to do a double tonight, even though it's Saturday night, because they're short and we need to be catching up, but it'll still be under an hour. Are going to be 20 and 21 here in Tractate Makkos, the 25th volume of the Talmud, in chapter 3. And now the Mishnas are going to start coming fast. So we're opening Mishnah number 3 on page 20a, about halfway down, even more than halfway down. Mishnah number 3, one who creates a bald spot on his head, and one who rounds the edge of his head by shaving the hair adjacent to the ear, and one who mars the edge of his beard, and one who cuts one incision in a display of mourning over the dead, are all liable to receive lashes. If he cut one incision over 5 dead people, or 5 incisions over 1 dead person, he is liable to receive lashes for each and every one. For rounding the edges of his head, one is liable to receive 2 sets of lashes, one from here, the hair adjacent to one ear, and one from there, the hair adjacent to the other ear. For marring the edges of his beard, there are 2 edges from here on one side of his face, and 2 from there on the other side of his face, and 1 from below on his chin, 5 points. Rabbi Eliezer says if he removed the hair on all the edges of his beard in one action, he is liable to receive only 1 set of lashes for all of them. And one is liable for marring the edges of his beard only if he removes the hair with a razor. Rabbi Eliezer says even if we remove the hair with tweezers or with a plane, like it's a carpentry tool, he would be liable to receive lashes. That's the Mishnah. Now, you may have noticed I don't have a long beard, and my hair is generally quite short. So really what we're talking about here is when lashes are appropriate for violating negative prohibitions, and there are prohibitions on how we cut our hair and how we trim our beards. These are very extensively nuanced laws. It's not so simple. There's definitely, I mean, you could see in the Orthodox world, people who are very, very observant have all different kinds of customs when it comes to haircuts and shaving. So this is not actually, we're going to talk a little bit about that now. But if you are curious about that and you want to have a discussion with your local Orthodox rabbi, or you want to research these laws, there's a lot more to be said than is going to fit in the short discussion of this Mishnah. But just some general principles. Pretty much all opinions agree that even if a Jewish man will shave, he should not be shaving with a razor, right? With blades and shaving cream and like cutting the hair all the way down to the skin. And so you'll find Orthodox men, even when they look clean shaven, they're using an electric razor because that's understood to not cut the hair all the way down to its roots. So even when they look clean shaven, it's not a perfect shave the way you would get, with a straight razor, with a multi-blade razor and shaving cream, etc. That's not what Jewish guys are doing. But some will some will have long beards and will only trim them a little bit. You will never see me with a long beard, but I do have a medical condition. I would grow a beard if I could. But as soon as it starts to get any length at all, I get ingrown hairs. I have a problem. I've tried so many times. I can't have a thick beard. Other people will. But there's also, like I said, very frum people, very religious people that are going to keep it very short or even what looks like clean shaven, even though it's done with electric. Like I say, there's a lot of nuance to this, and we're not going to be able to get into detail about it tonight. That's beyond the scope of this class. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. The sages taught from the verse concerning priests, they shall not create a bald spot upon their heads. Leviticus 21:5. Now, one might have thought, now here what we're really talking about is in the ancient world, it seems to have been a custom in this region that when people had a death in the family or someone very near to them, they would like shave a spot, like maybe, I don't know, the size of like your thumb or something, a spot, make themselves look really odd, but it was just a custom to do that for the dead. And the Torah came to say, we don't do that. That's absolutely prohibited to do that. So they shall not create a bald spot upon their heads for the dead. One might have thought that even if he created 4 or 5 bald spots in one action, he will be liable to receive only one set of lashes. Therefore, the verse states bald spot in the singular, to render one liable to receive lashes for each and every bald spot. And the verse continues, upon their heads. What is the meaning when the verse states that term? Since it is stated, you shall neither lacerate yourselves nor place a bald spot between your eyes for the dead in Deuteronomy 14:1, one might have thought that one would be liable only for placing a bald spot between the eyes. From where is it derived that the prohibition includes placing a bald spot on the entire head? The verse states upon their heads, to include the entire head. And I've derived this prohibition only with regard to priests, for whom the Torah established numerous additional commandments. Since the verse, they shall not create a bald spot, is written in the context of the laws of priests, from where do I derive that a non-priest is also liable for violating that prohibition? Bald spot, the term bald spot, is stated here in Deuteronomy 14:1 with regard to non-priests, and bald spot is stated there with regard to priests. Just as there with regard to priests, one is liable for each and every bald spot that he creates, and is liable for a bald spot created anywhere on the head, as he is for a bald spot created between the eyes, so too here with regard to a non-priest, one is liable for each and every bald spot that he creates, and is liable for a bald spot created anywhere on his head, as he is for a bald spot created between the eyes. And just as there, with regard to non-priests, the prohibition is stated with regard to creating a bald spot as an expression of mourning over the dead, so too here with regard to priests, the prohibition is stated with regard to creating a bald spot as an expression of mourning over the dead. Now the Gemara asks, with regard to these 4 or 5 bald spots created over one dead person, for which one is liable to receive lashes for each and every spot, what are the circumstances? If we say that he created those bald spots one after the other, and with 5 separate forewarnings, right? Because the based in the rabbinic court is not going to administer lashes, corporal punishment, unless the person was warned, hey, if you do that, you're going to be subject to the punishment of lashes. And then he does it immediately after the warning in the presence of witnesses. That's the only time that lashes would be applied. That's why this is something that really probably never happens or rarely happens. But the question is this a lashes-bearing penalty or not? That's really what we study very closely, more than the practical aspect of how often this is going to happen. This hasn't happened in thousands of years in terms of administering lashes for these kinds of things. But let's continue. 1, preceding each action. It is obvious that he is liable for each and every bald spot if he was warned and he did it after he was warned and he created a bald spot. Then he was warned and created a bald spot again. Okay, those would be separate sets of lashes. In that case, he is one who violates the same prohibition several times and is punished for each violation for which he was forewarned. Now we're on page 20b. Rather, say that he created 5 bald spots with 1 forewarning. Then is he liable for 5 sets of lashes? But didn't we learn in a Mishna on page 21a, or won't we learn on page 21a, that a nazir, one who takes a vow to abstain from all products of the grapevine and not to cut his hair and not to come into contact with the dead for the period of his nazirus, that a nazir who was drinking wine all day long, right, he's prohibited to drink wine because he took this voluntary vow upon himself. But once he took it, wine is prohibited to him, along with all other products of the grapevine. So a nazir who was drinking wine all day is liable to receive only 1 set of lashes. If onlookers said to him, do not drink, forewarning him several times, and he drinks after each forewarning, then he is liable to receive lashes for each and every drink. And the Gemara answers, well, no, this law is necessary only with regard to 1. Now we're saying since it was 1 forewarning, and then he drank all day, it would only be 1 set of lashes. So then if somebody received 1 forewarning, don't make a bald spot for the dead, and he made 5 spots, is he getting 1 set of lashes or 5? Sounds like it should be, if we're taking the law from the case of the nazir, only 1 set of lashes. So why do we need to know that if we can already learn that from the nazir? So the Gemara answers, no, this law is necessary only with regard to one who, after 1 forewarning, smeared his fingers in a depilatory agent and then placed his fingers simultaneously on his hair, thereby creating 5 separate bald spots simultaneously. This would be tantamount to a forewarning for each and every one of those bald spots, and he would get 5 sets of lashes. Now, the Gemara asks, and how much is the measure of a bald spot for which one would be liable to lashes? And Rav Huna says it must be a sufficient size so that the bald skin will be visible on his head. And Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, it is the size of a Cilician bean, Kigeris. And the Gemara comments, this Amoraic dispute is parallel to a dispute between Tanaim. Amoraic, a dispute among the Amoraim, the sages of the Gemara, and this is parallel to an earlier dispute among the sages of the Mishna, the sages known as Tanaim. And how much is the measure of a bald spot? Is the size of a Cilician bean. And Acherim say, which is usually Rabbi Meir, it must be of sufficient size so that bald skin will be visible on his head. Rav Yehuda Bar Chaviva said that there are 3 Tanaim who disagree concerning this matter. One says a spot the size of a Cilician bean, a little bean. I don't know why it's from Cilicia. I don't even know where Cilicia is. Cilicia. Somebody let me know where Cilicia is. And one says a spot of sufficient size so that bald skin will be visible on his head. And the other one says a spot that is the measure of 2 hairs. And there is one who removed the opinion that is the measure of 2 hairs and inserted an opinion that it is the size of a lentil. And your mnemonic to remember the different opinions is from a Mishna with regard to the laws of tzaras, that the measure of impurity for a snow white mark of tzaras, known as a baharis, is the Cilician bean, and the measure of impurity for the raw flesh that grows from the or within the baharis is a lentil. In a related law, the sages taught one who removes a scissor-full of hair from his head on Shabbos is liable. And how much is a scissor-full? And Rav Yehuda says 2 hairs. Very interesting. What's a scissor-full? Like, you can't cut your hair on Shabbos. You can't actually pick at your hangnails, because that's actually like a form of harvesting, or it may be a form of sorting. There's various problems. So you don't trim your nails and you don't cut your hair on Shabbos. So what's the minimum measure for which you would be liable for cutting your hair on Shabbos? So this opinion says a scissor-full, and what is that? So somebody says 2 hairs. If you cut 2 hairs, you're liable for hair cutting on Shabbos. But isn't it taught in a baraisa that for a bald spot, the measure is 2 hairs, from which it may be inferred that the measure with regard to labor on Shabbos is different than for a bald spot? So the Gemara answers, amend the baraisa and say, and likewise with regard to a bald spot, the measure is 2 hairs, indicating that the minimum measure for violating Shabbos and the minimum measure for creating this prohibited bald spot is the same, taking out 2 hairs. That is also taught in a baraisa. One who removes a scissor-full of hair on Shabbos is liable. And how much is a scissors-full? It is 2 hairs. Rabbi Eliezer says 1 hair. And the rabbis concede to Rabbi Eliezer in the case of one who removes white hairs from black ones, which would be sorting. That's another prohibited labor on Shabbos. Even if he removes 1 hair, he is liable. Since his intent was to remove that particular hair, its removal constitutes a complete action. And the Gemara adds, and for a man, the matter is prohibited even during the week, due to the fact that it is stated, neither shall a man don a woman's garment. Removal of white hairs for the purposes of beautification is characteristic of women, and it is prohibited for a man to perform that action, such an action. I don't have a halakha here about that. Well, wait a minute, here it goes. It is prohibited for a man to pluck white hairs from among black ones. Even if he removed a single white hair from the black ones, he violates the prohibition of a man wearing a woman's garment. In other words, this kind of beautification for a man is associated in halacha with an action that women do, and therefore men should not do it. The Ravad questions why one should be liable to receive lashes for doing so, as the Gemara states that it is a mere prohibition, as opposed to a prohibition for which one would be liable to receive lashes for transgressing it. Furthermore, removing 1 hair does not constitute an adornment of a woman, as it is not at all noticeable. So this would require further research. But even if it's not a lashes-bearing penalty, it does seem, just know that if you're going to be an observant Jew, there are certain practices that it wouldn't occur to you. Well, these days, men do a lot of things that formerly only women did. So maybe it's okay, but if you're not sure, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. Okay, where was I? Okay, the Mishna teaches, and one who rounds the edge of his head is flogged for violating this negative prohibition. The sages taught the edge of his head is the extremity of his head. And what is the extremity of his head? This is a reference to one who levels the hairline of his temples to the hairline behind his ear and to the hairline of his forehead, and there is no hair behind the ears or on the forehead, and one who removes the hair from the temples so that they are like those areas violates the prohibition against rounding the edges of his head. Again, complex. We're not going to get it just from this cursory reading. What kind of a haircut would be a prohibited haircut? Do more research if that is something that you are interested in. The Tana taught a baraisa before Rav Chisda, but standard haircuts, like normal haircuts, are not going to violate that prohibition. If you're going to get some kind of weird haircut, do a little research. The Tana taught a baraisa before Rav Chisda, before both one who rounds the edges of his head and one for whom the edges of his head are rounded are flogged. And Rav Chisda said to him, is one who eats dates that are in a sieve flogged? By analogy, if a person rounded the edges of another person's head, Why should the person whose head was rounded receive lashes? He performed no action. And Rav Chisda proceeded to explain to the Tana in response to the one who says to you, who is the Tana of the Baraisa, say that it is Rabbi Yehuda, who says, in the case of a prohibition that does not involve an action, one is still flogged for its violation. Rava says, this Baraisa can be explained as referring to one who rounds the edges of his head for himself, and he is liable both for rounding the edges of his head and for having the edges of his head rounded. And everyone agrees that he is flogged because he performed an action. Rav Ashi says the Baraisa can be explained as referring to a case where one for whom the edges of his head are being rounded assists the person rounding his head by repositioning his head to facilitate that rounding, and everyone agrees that he is flogged. I mean, if he goes, if he's going to have that kind of a haircut and he puts himself in the chair and cooperates as the one who's actually doing the action is doing it, you can see how he's participating in that action. In fact, he probably commissioned the action, is paying for it. The Mishna teaches, and one who mars the edge of his beard is flogged. So the sages taught the edge of his beard is the extremity of his beard. And what is the extremity of his beard? It is the stalk of his beard, i.e. the 5 edges of the beard enumerated in the Mishnah, where hair collects in one spot like grain on stalks. I mean, there's a chart here that generally says that the edges of the beard would be here, here, and here, here, and here. Again, if you're, this would require further research. And one who mars the edge of his beard is flogged. And I'm sorry. So the Mishnah teaches, and one who cuts one incision in a display of mourning over the dead is flogged. Right. So then a question would become, people who harm themselves and are cutting themselves. Right. Very, very, it's a serious condition. Somebody has got emotional challenges and should seek therapy. If they're cutting themselves for any reason. In the ancient world, this was done, it could be done for idolatry. It could be done as a sign of mourning for the dead, definitely prohibited by the Torah. If it wasn't being done for idolatry, for mourning for the dead, but the person is just self-harming, it might not violate this prohibition, but it definitely, I think it's definitely prohibited halachically, because you're harming your body, and your body's not actually yours, right? God is lending you this body to ride around in. This is another reason why we don't incinerate, right? Why we don't cremate afterward, because this is a holy vessel that is entrusted with carrying your soul around in this life, and we need to take care of it. Like actually promoting your health and taking care of yourself so that you'll live longer and be able to perform more mitzvahs is at least laudable, and some would say obligatory. To take care of your health is obligatory, and harming yourself is definitely no good. Okay, and one who cuts one incision, a display of mourning over the dead, is flogged. And the sages taught a halachic midrash on the verse, and an incision for the soul you shall not place in your flesh, Leviticus 19:28. Had the verse stated only, and an incision, one might have thought that this prohibition applies to any incision cut in sorrow, even if he cut an incision in sorrow over his house that collapsed or over his ship that sunk at sea. Therefore, the verse states, for the soul, from which it is derived that he is liable for an incision in mourning only for the dead alone. And from where is it derived that one who cuts 5 incisions in mourning over one dead person is liable for each and every incision? The verse states, and an incision to render him liable for each and every incision. Rabbi Yosef says, from where is it derived concerning one who cuts one incision in mourning over 5 dead people that he is liable for each and every person for whom he cut that incision? And the verse states, for the soul, to render him liable for each and every dead person. The Gemara asks, but didn't you already derive from the term for the soul an exemption for one who cut an incision in sorrow over his house that collapsed or over his ship that sunk at sea? Now we're on page 21a. And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yosef derives that law from a different source, as Rabbi Yosef holds that an incision over the dead and a laceration over the dead are one transgression. And it is written there, with regard to laceration, you shall neither lacerate yourselves nor place a bald spot between your eyes for the dead, indicating that one is liable for cutting oneself in mourning only over a dead person. Therefore, he can derive from the term for the soul that one is liable for each and every soul over whom he cut that incision. On a related note, The Gemara cites that which Shmuel says. One who cuts his flesh with a utensil in mourning over the dead is liable. The Gemara raised an objection from a Baraisa. An incision and a laceration are one transgression, as they are both performed over the dead. But the difference is that an incision is cut by hand, i.e. with one's fingernails, while a laceration is cut with a utensil. So apparently, cutting an incision is not accomplished with a utensil. And the Gemara answers, Shmuel stated his opinion in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who holds that an incision and a laceration are synonymous in every sense. And the Gemara relates that a Tana taught a Baraisa before Rabbi Yochanan. One who cuts an incision over a dead person, whether he did so by hand or with a utensil, is liable. Concerning one who cuts an incision for idolatry, if he does so by hand, he is liable, but if he does so with a utensil, he is exempt. Rabbi Yochanan was puzzled by this Baraisa. But isn't the reverse written with regard to the priests of Baal? And they lacerated themselves in accordance with their custom with swords and lances in 1 Kings 18:28, indicating that customarily this term laceration was accomplished with a utensil. Rabbi Yochanan instructed the Tana rather amend the Baraisa and say, concerning one who cuts an incision for idolatry, if he does so by hand, he's exempt, but if he does so with a utensil, he is liable. Now, the Mishnah teaches, and for rounding the edges of his head, one is liable to receive 2 sets of lashes. One from here, the hair adjacent to one ear, and one from there, the hair adjacent to the other ear. And the Gemara relates that when he taught this Mishnah, Rav Sheshes would gesture toward his temple, which is the point between the 2 parts of the head, the front and back. And similarly, with regard to the law in the Mishnah, for marring the edges of his beard, there are 2 edges from here and 2 from there and 1 from below. And Rav Sheshes would gesture toward the point between the parts of the beard. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Eliezer says, if he removed the hair on all the edges of his beard in one action, he is liable to receive only 1 set of lashes. And the Gemara clarifies, he maintains that the prohibition of marring the edges of his beard is a single prohibition, and therefore one is not liable for marring each edge. And the Mishnah teaches, and one is liable for marring the edges of his beard only if he removes the hair with a razor. And the sages taught a halachic midrash. The verse states, and the edge of their beard they may not shave. Now one might have thought that for any manner of shaving, even if he shaved the beard with scissors, he would be liable. Therefore, the verse states, you may not mar the edge of your beard, indicating that one is liable only for shaving that destroys the hair from the root, which is not the case with scissors. If the verse had stated only, and that's why an electric razor, electric shaver, is permitted, at least in the, even in the Orthodox world, but in the communities that permit shaving the beard at all, that would be with an electric razor because it's like scissors. If the verse had stated only, you may not mar, one might have thought that even if he removed the hair with tweezers or with a carpenter's plane, he would be liable to receive lashes as they destroy the hair from its roots. Therefore, the verse states, they may not shave, indicating that only hair removal by means of shaving is prohibited, and that is not accomplished with tweezers and a plane. How so? Based on these 2 verses, for what form of hair removal is one liable? One is liable only for shaving that involves marring, and you must say that this is shaving with a razor, straight razor or blades. The blade goes right on the skin and just trims it down to the very, very bottom. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Eliezer says even if he removed the hair with tweezers or with a plane, he would be liable to receive lashes. And the Gemara objects, whichever way you look at it, it is difficult. If he derives the law by means of a verbal analogy that he received from his teachers between the laws of shaving written with regard to priests and the laws of marring with regard to non-priests, let Rabbi Eliezer require shaving with a razor in order to render him liable, as did the rabbis. If he does not derive the law by means of a verbal analogy, he should also not exempt one who removes the hair with scissors, as that would be included in the category of shaving. And the Gemara answers, actually, Rabbi Eliezer derives the law by means of a verbal analogy, and he holds that these 2, the tweezers and the plane, accomplish shaving. His dispute with the rabbis does not relate to the derivation of the law. Rather, it is a dispute with regard to the definition of shaving. He would say that if you're plucking or you're shaving with a carpenter's plane, it is shaving with a razor. But the majority overruled him. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 3. Now, Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 3. One who imprints a tattoo by inserting a die into recesses carved in the skin is also liable to receive lashes. Again, we're talking about lashes, not the exact definitions of haircuts, shaving, or now tattooing. Right? The question is, do you receive lashes for violating the negative prohibition on getting a tattoo? So we'll talk a little bit about what a tattoo is, but it's not going to be an extensive discussion of that. So one who imprints a tattoo by inserting a die into the recesses carved in the skin is also liable to receive lashes. If one imprinted on the skin with a die, but he did not carve the skin, like if somebody gets henna at a wedding, that is not violating the prohibition on tattoos because that's printing without carving. Or if one carved the skin but did not imprint the tattoo by adding dye, he is not liable. He is not liable until he imprints and carves the skin with ink or with kechol, or with any substance that marks. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, he is liable only if he writes the name there, as it is stated, and a tattoo inscription you shall not place upon you, comma, I am the Lord, from Leviticus 19:28. Now, there's not actually a comma in the Torah. So is God just punctuating the command by saying, do this, don't do that, I am the Lord, reminding you who's giving you the order? Or is he saying that, you're not going to even tattoo God's name onto your skin, and that's the only way? We don't interpret it that way. We say any tattoo is prohibited. Now the Gemara. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, is Rabbi Shimon saying that one is liable only if he actually inscribes the words, I am the Lord, in his skin? And Rav Ashi said to him, no. He is saying, as Bar Kapara teaches, one is liable only if he inscribes a name of an object of idolatry. As it is stated, and a tattoo inscription you shall not place upon you, I am the Lord, which means do not place an idolatrous name on your skin as I am the Lord and no one else. That's not the law. Any tattoo is prohibited for a Jew. If you put an idolatrous name on your skin, then maybe that would be 2 violations. Rav Malkiah says that Rav Ada bar Ahava says it is prohibited for a person to place burnt ashes on his wound to promote healing because it looks like a tattoo. Since few statements were attributed to Rav Malkiah, and there was another sage named Rav Malkiah, there's Malkiah and Malkiyu, who also cited statements in the name of Rav Ada bar Ahava, the Gemara provides a mnemonic for these laws. Rav Nachman, the son of Rav Ika, says the laws of skewer, maidservants, and follicles were stated by Rav Malkiyu. The laws of forelock, burnt ashes, and cheese were stated by Rav Malkiah. Rav Papa says the distinction is a different one. Those statements that relate to a Mishna or a Baraisa were stated by Rav Malkiah. Independent laws were taught by Rav Malkiyu. And your mnemonic to remember that distinction is the Mishnah is queen, indicating the connection between Rav Malkiah and the Mishnah, because Malkiah sounds like Malka. And the Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between the criteria of Rav Nachman and Rav Papa in this regard? And the Gemara answers, the practical difference between them is with regard to the law of maidservants, which appears in a Mishnah. According to Rav Papa, the law was stated by Rav Malkiah, not Rav Malkiyu. So the Gemara addresses the matter of placing burnt ashes on a wound. The Gemara relates, Rabbi bar Abaye was fastidious and did not place ashes even on the wound of bloodletting, as that too appears like a tattoo. And Rav Ashi says any place where there is a wound, his wound proves about itself that the person's intent when he covers it with ashes is to promote healing and is not a tattoo, and therefore if it's going to promote healing, go right ahead. You're not tattooing. The appearance of that tattoo is not something we're going to worry about, and if it will promote healing, go ahead and do it. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 4. Now, Mishnah number 5. As you can see, we're coming to the end of a chapter. The Mishnahs are coming more rapidly, and in fact, with God's help, we'll do a single daf tomorrow, Sunday, and then a double daf and a siyum on Monday. So we should be concluding tractate Makkos with God's help on Monday. Mishnah 5. A nazir who was drinking wine all day is liable to receive only 1 set of lashes if onlookers told him, do not drink, forewarning him several times, and he drinks after each forewarning, he is liable to receive lashes for each and every drink. If the nazir was rendering himself impure through exposure to corpses all day, he is liable to receive only 1 set of lashes. If they said to him, do not render yourself impure, do not render yourself impure. And he renders himself impure after each forewarning. Then he is liable for each and every incident. If the nazir was shaving his hair all day, and he is liable to receive only one set of lashes. And they said to him, do not shave, do not shave. And after each forewarning he shaves, he is liable for each and every time he shaves. What should we be asking ourselves? Sounds like the same principle was repeated 3 times. Okay, these are the 3 prohibitions on nazir. Don't drink wine or eat any product of the grapevine. Don't come into contact with the dead. And don't shave or get a haircut. Okay. But since all 3 of those are prohibitions on a nazir, and the principle is if he gets forewarned once and then he does it all day long, it's only one set of lashes. If he gets forewarned before each action, it's repeated over and over. I mean, he gets a separate set of lashes for each one. Why do we have to hear that 3 times? Let's see. If a person was wearing a garment consisting of diverse kinds, right, wool and linen in one garment together, all day, he is liable to receive only one set of lashes. If they said to him, don't wear it, and he removes it and dons it after each forewarning, he is liable for each and every time that he dons the garment. Now we're on page 21b. Apropos the case where one receives several sets of lashes for performing a single action, the Mishna continues, there is one who plows a single furrow and is liable to receive lashes for violating 8 prohibitions. How so? For plowing with an ox and a donkey, in violation of the prohibition, you shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Deuteronomy 22:10. And they are consecrated, and therefore he is guilty of misuse of consecrated property. And he is plowing diverse kinds in a vineyard, and it is during the sabbatical year when it is prohibited to work the land, and it is on a festival when plowing is prohibited labor. And he is both a priest and a nazir, and is performing the plowing in a place of impurity imparted by a corpse, which is prohibited for both a priest and a nazir, right? This is one of the sages' hypotheticals. Could we dream up a scenario where somebody would be violating so many different prohibitions at once? And are we going to give... So first, it's just an exercise. Is there a scenario where they're violating, 8 different prohibitions in one action or at the same time? And so they come up with a scenario. Hanania ben Chakinai says, if he was wearing a garment consisting of diverse kinds, if he's wearing kilayim, while plowing, he's also flogged for violating that prohibition. And the sages said to him, that is not a prohibition in that same category as the others, as it is not connected to the act of plowing. Hanania ben Chakinai said to them, according to that criterion, the fact that he is a nazir is also not in the same category. What does being a nazir have to do with plowing? As a nazir and a priest are not flogged for plowing, rather they are flogged for contracting impurity imparted by a corpse. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. Yeah, we're doing very well, actually, on time. So, get a head start on where I thought we would be. But it's also very late for my East Coast people. So, yeah, I'm almost done. If you have questions or comments, please get them in now. Okay, so just a very short, just starting the Gemara on this Mishnah, number 5, on page 21b. Rabbi Bevai says, that Rabbi Yosei says that when the Mishnah teaches with regard to wearing a garment of diverse kinds of wool and linen, and he removes it and dons it after each forewarning, does it mean that one is liable for each forewarning only if he actually removes and dons it? Or perhaps one is liable even if he inserts and removes the arm from the sleeve if he inserts and removes his arm from the sleeve of his garment. Perhaps this is also considered removing and donning the garment. So the Gemara relates, Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika, gestured. One is liable only for actually inserting his body in the garment entirely and then removing it, not for just finishing the act of putting on a garment. So if you just took off the sleeve and put the sleeve back on, took off the sleeve and put the sleeve back on, it wouldn't be like you took on this clothing of kilayim, let's say a jacket that had both wool and linen in it. If you only half took it off and then put it back on, half took it off and put it back on, it would not be like putting it on and off. But if you took it fully off and put it on, right? If you were warned each time, hey, you're putting on kilayim, you would be subject to a set of lashes each time. If you're only warned once and you took it on and put it off, took it on and put it off, sounds like you would not be liable, right? That would be more like the nazir who keeps drinking all day. The Gemara and Rav Ashi says the reference in the Mishnah is not to actually removing and donning the garment. Rather, even if he only waited an interval equivalent to the period required to remove and to don the garment, he is liable to receive lashes for each and every forewarning. In other words, if they say to you, hey, you're wearing kilayim, you can't be wearing that, and he doesn't take it off, then every time they warn him and he doesn't take it off, he's going to be liable to lashes as a separate instance. That's what I've got for us tonight. Looks like there's just one question from Frank. So, unibrows are okay. Unibrows. So, what makes a unibrow not okay? Unibrows, isn't a unibrow how somebody's eyebrows just grow in? Are you asking me, can you pluck your eyebrows? Because because you're saying, are you creating a bald spot between your eyes? I don't think that is what we're talking about, right? Are you saying a man who plucks eyebrows because he doesn't want to have a unibrow? Would that violate putting on the garment of a woman? Would that be a man doing something that only women do? That's a great question. I don't know. I think that there is some flexibility here because there are customs now that have become widely accepted as things that men do. And if a man does that, he's not in any way trying to, act like a woman in a prohibited manner. But I don't know. I'm not a rabbi, period. And I'm certainly not a poskening Rav. So questions like that, I refer to your local Orthodox rabbi. That's what I've got for us tonight. And with God's help, we're together again tomorrow, Sunday, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night. Good vach, Shavuot Tov.